Hi, I'm Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting. Are you totally overwhelmed with your scraps? Is your scrap bin starting to look like this, or maybe it's even bigger than this, and the scraps just keep growing and growing and we don't know what to do with them? Well, I'm going to show you an easy way to scrap bust. You'll start out with this and you're going to end up with this. It doesn't take a lot of time. Give yourself 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes a day, and you will have those scraps under control in no time. So let's get started. Let's start out with how do we collect our scraps. First of all, you need a container that you can put everything into, all of your scraps, all sizes, all shapes, everything. I mean, unless it's a little tiny unusable piece, everything goes into the scrap bin, and this is my scrap bin. Now, when it gets full, which you can fit a ton of scraps in here, when it gets full, then we do our sorting. So you want to make sure that you don't let it get overflowingly full, but rather that when it hits the top, it's time to do some scrap busting. Now, this size, actually this container is a hefty container, or they have Sterilite containers. This is a 15-quart container. My little bin here is about the same size as that. So if you look, the measurements, I don't know, about 14 inches, maybe 7 inches tall, close to 12 here, square, rectangular. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever fits under your sewing machine or next to your sewing machine so that it's easy access and you can put your scraps in here. So what I have done, my first step, once I have this bin, is I need to start sorting. I'm going to tell you, do not get a huge basket or a huge bin or even a garbage can, one of those kitchen garbage cans. It can be overwhelming when you're trying to sort through that much fabric. It's so much easier if you have a smaller bin. I mean, you can even get a very small bin. This is something that's even smaller yet. You can use this if you have a small area next to your sewing machine to collect those scraps. Throw them in there. When this is full, then you go ahead and scrap bust. Some people scrap bust after every single quilt, which I think is a great idea. Sometimes I wish I would have thought of it before, because then all the fabrics that are in that particular bin or bag, a Ziploc bag will work, they all match. And you might even be able to get another quilt out of it, or a pot holder, or a table runner, or something. But if you do all the scrap busting at that point, right after you finished your project, you've got a nice little stash that you can easily store in a project bag or on a shelf, whatever you want. This is my way, but again, you need to adapt it according to you and what you use. So let's get started on our sorting. I've already pulled out, these were all actually in here. I mean, this really does hold a lot, plus it was kind of overflowing. I've separated all the lights. So these are, some of them aren't white, they're just light fabrics, but I've pulled those all out. I'm going to do those at another time. I'm not going to do those right now. Then I pulled out, for this particular scrap busting, I like to do it according to color. So I sort according to color, and I decided I was going to do blue. So I pulled out all of the blues from here. I've already gone through it all. I've already cut a lot of those, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. But then I'm going to show you how I cut the blues so that I can sort them into the categories that are listed on the handout. So let's take a look at what I've created from the blue fabrics that I've already removed and cut most of them. Once we have cut all of our scraps to size into usable pieces, as it says on our handout, then this is what we're going to end up with. It totally depends on what you decide is most important for your type of quilting. This is mine, but you can take the handout and actually in the sections where I have large pieces, pre-cut, strips, and crumbs, change it around if you need to and add in or take out anything that doesn't meet your particular needs. So for me, so you can see what I end up with after I have sorted through all of a particular color that was placed in my scrap bin, I actually cut them according to what's written on these signs. The first section that I have are the large pieces. Sometimes the scraps are just little tiny scraps, but other times I actually throw in a chunk of fabric maybe that I finished with. It's not large enough to fold and put on my fabric shelf, which would mean it has to be over a half of a yard. So as I look through those scraps, I did have several large pieces that were in the group. I had some half-yard pieces. Here's an example. These are some half-yard pieces. Now, a half-a-yard piece would not be something that I would put on my shelf where I have the rest of my folded fabrics. It's just too small and it gets lost in the shuffle. But I can have a bin where I nicely put all of these half-yard pieces. You can tell they're half-yard. I'll have the bin labeled and those get set aside. Now, there may be some fabrics where I have 9 inches left, so a 1/4 yard is 9 inches by the width of fabric. So these are all 1/4 yards that I have folded. I only have 2 in this particular bunch, but I will fold them in these nice little rectangles and they will go in my bin that are 1/4 yard pieces. The bin that I have the most in is the fat quarter bin. I have tons of fat quarters. So for those, I have chosen to use a 3-drawer stackable plastic cabinet. It's just a small one on wheels. You can buy them anywhere. And I have sorted by color all of my fat quarters, and they are in there like this. Now, this will just go right in that bin with my blue fabrics, again, because I have so many. I don't have as many of these, so I have some smaller bins that these will go into. Again, depending on your stash, I can't really tell you what would work for you because I don't know what you have. But you can decide, do I want a bin? Do I want a drawer? Do I want a shelf? Do I want a cubby? Sometimes those wooden cubbies that we use on our desks work really well. But these are those larger pieces. The final one are fat eighths. Fat eighths are usable pieces because they're 9 inches by 22 inches, half of the fat quarters. So we've got all these together. These are my large pieces. The second group, once I have actually cut from my scrap any of the pieces that would qualify for these categories, then I look for pre-cuts because that's what I use most often. Pre-cuts are the 2.5 inch mini charms. They are the 5-inch charm squares, 10-inch layer cake, and then jelly roll strips. The final section would be strips. These are just those leftover pieces that are a particular width and no particular length. They can be used for all sorts of fun scraps. And so if you look at what I have here, I have labeled on our handout 1.5 inch strips. Again, they can be any length, but 1.5 inch wide. I also do use some 1 3/4 inches, especially if I'm doing something that I want to oversize a strip a little bit. So I put both of those into this category here, 1.5 and 1 3/4 inches. But you can see from what I have, they're all different sizes. Some are short and some are really long. So it just depends on what the size of that original piece was, what I can get out of it. Same holds true for 2-inch strips because I do use the 1.5 inch finished width on some of my blocks. So I would need a 2-inch for that. You can see some are long, some are short. It just kind of depends on what I had. Now the 2.5 inch, this is the jelly roll width, but the scrap that I had did not have enough for the jelly roll category. Some of them are short. This is maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches long. Some can be really long, but they're all less than a width of fabric, which is 40 to 42 inches. So they go in this particular clip. The final one, and this is totally something I use, I love to use 3.5 inch pieces, rectangles, especially for pieced borders. So I do like to collect the 3.5 inch. These can be width of fabric strips or they're just 3.5 inches shortcut pieces. They all go into the same category. So they all go into the same clip. So these are the different pieces that I like to end up with. If it's a piece that is smaller than 3.5 inches, or maybe even 2.5 inches long, and at least 1 inch wide, these are actually called crumbs. Now, I have not made anything with a crumb, but I started to cut them because I still had all these little pieces left over when I cut all the rest of my scraps. So I decided, who knows, there are so many videos and tutorials and patterns out there of people who use crumbs. I'm going to give it a try. So these pieces, as you can see, some of them are, I don't know what this is, probably about 3 inches maybe. Here's some smaller ones here. I don't really sort these in any particular way. I just put them all in the bin. I do like to keep them flat because you can stack more in there when they're flat. And it takes a lot of crumbs to create a block. So if you're into that, cut the crumbs. If you're not, throw all this away. Once I have cut all of my pieces, as you can see, I've got them all sorted. I put them in a bin. This is really scuffed up because I use it a lot, but I like the size, I like the bin. And once I have done that, I put all of those cut pieces of the strips and whatever else works for this particular fabric color. This is my blue bin. Now, I might not put my charm squares or my layer cake squares or my jelly roll strips in here just because I have other bins where I keep all of those. But if you don't have a lot and you want to sort them by color, I just stack them all in here. This holds a ton, and it does take quite a while to get all of these to fill up a bin. The key is use the scraps. If we use our scraps, then the bin keeps going down. If we are collecting scraps, that's another story, and it's never going to go away. So one suggestion that was made, when you do your scrap busting, put a date on each one of the labels so you know when you cut these. If you take a look at this and you have not used anything out of this in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever your limit is, gift them to someone, give them to a charity that might put these into a quilt, or if you're really not going to use them and they've gotten out of date and you don't like them, you can always throw them away. Totally up to you. The rulers that I usually use, I'll use my long 6.5 by 24.5 inch ruler sometimes, only if I've got a large scrap and I'm cutting yardage. Usually I don't need to use that ruler. These rulers work really well. My 2.5 by 12.5 inch, my 6.5 inch square, and my 12.5 inch square. I can get pretty much all of these pieces cut using these. I also use my Stripology ruler if I have a larger piece and I'm going to be cutting strips. This works really well because I can do a lot at one time. Now, how detailed do you want to get with this? Some people would look at this system and think there is no way I would ever cut all these pieces and label them. Then just take your bin and do the first sort where you pull out your white and light fabric strips, put those in a bin. Pull out the blues, put those in a bin. The reds, put those in a bin. And just have bins that have color. Any kind of organization is going to be helpful. I've got some pretty odd pieces here, so let's take a look and see what we can do to trim these up into usable pieces. So here's my first one. This piece looks like it was a layer cake that I cut a little chunk out of. So what do I have left? Well, I know I have 5-inch squares left on this. I can get 2 5-inch squares out of this side. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to line this up on the 5-inch line, and I'm going to cut 2 5-inch squares. And then I'm going to take these are 5-inch by 5-inch charm squares, and I'm going to put them on the charm pile. I have a section here that looks like I can get another 5-inch square out of it. That's my prime choice. We're going from large to small. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut that 5-inch square. Now, if you don't use 5-inch squares very often, then go ahead and cut something else that you do use. But here I've got a 5-inch square. I'm going to put that in the charm pile. I've got this left. Get my smaller ruler and let's see what size this is right here. Well, that's exactly 2.5, pretty close to 2.5 inch. This is going to be a 2.5 inch by we don't care what inch strip. So there I've cut that, and that's going to go in the 2.5 inch pile. Then I have this little tiny piece left, which looks like it's wide enough. Yep, it's 1.5 inches because I throw away anything under 1.5 inches. And 1.5 inches in both directions. It's more than 1.5 inches in length. So this is going to be a crumb, and I put that in my crumb basket. Sometimes we have some odd shaped pieces. I actually used part of this layer cake square and I have these left over. So I'm thinking we're going from large to small. So large would be a strip. So what's the largest size strip I can get out of this piece? So in looking at this, it looks like if I use a 2.5 inch, it's going to go just about that length. But if I go down to a 1.5 inch, I get a much longer strip. So I'm going to do that. Again, totally up to you. I don't ever leave that crooked end on it. I always trim those up. So I'm just going to go down to the end here, make sure I've got it all lined up, because when you go to use them, you don't want to have to do that trimming. You want to get that done. This is not a usable piece. This goes in the garbage. This goes in the 1.5 to 1 3/4 inch pile. And I still have some left. So now what can I get out of this? Let's see, can I get a 2.5 inch square out of it? And I can. Oh, it's so close. Oh, so close. But I'm going to do it. And there I have a 2.5 inch square. That's going to go in the 2.5 inch square pile. Can I get anything out of this? Is it bigger than 1.5 inches? So let's see. That's 1 inch, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, and actually it does go down to 1.5 inches, so I'm going to use it. This is going to go in the crumb pile. Oh, maybe I can go a little longer. Look at that. Yeah, I can go longer. Those pieces are going to be thrown away. This is going to go in the crumbs, and there I have another piece done. So my blues are finished for my scrap bin. I'm going to put all of the strips in my blue bin. These are all my blue fabrics. I like to lay them flat because you can fit more in there if they're laying flat. If you just throw them in and bunch them up, they take up too much space. So I've got all of these fabrics that I have cut. I'm putting them in. I can fold this up a little bit. And then put my lid on and put my blue bin back on the shelf. Now, this bin, my crumbs bin, I have a lid for that, and I am not sorting this by color. They just all go in the bin. I keep them as flat as I can, but it's not a huge big deal. And that's going to be my crumbs bin, and I will set that aside. I have, again, my charm square bin, my 2.5 inch square bin, my layer cake bin, and my jelly roll bin. I did label all these with the year. I'll probably add to them because the clip isn't close to being full, and decide periodically when I open the bin what I'm going to do with the fabrics that are in there. There's so many wonderful patterns that you can use. All of our charm squares, our layer cakes, our jelly rolls, our 2.5 inch squares, and those cut strips. You don't have to do a total scrappy look. If you don't want to, you can add yardage to that. It's up to you. But this fabric, you paid for every one of these pieces. Just because they're cut up, it doesn't mean that now they have no value. They do. And when you put them together, you can create so much more using the leftovers than you ever could have imagined. I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Thank you so much for joining me.